So there's this guy named Gordon. Gordon was born in the year 1906 in Canada. His mother's name is Sarah, and his father's name is Cyrus. Gordon had just one sibling, a sister called Winifred. Winifred had two kids, Sanford, a boy, and Jessie, a girl. In August of the year 1924, Gordon and his family moved to California, where Gordon, at just 19 years old, convinced his father Cyrus to help him buy a piece of land in the rural outskirts of that area for chicken rearing. His father did, and Gordon bought this land. A quiet piece of land, very isolated and hard to reach. It was the perfect land for building a chicken ranch. Or so his father thought, as Gordon wasn't really interested in raising chickens as it was later discovered. He was instead interested in building something else, something unspeakable. As a young guy in his late teens, Gordon seemed to enjoy, quite strangely, the company of very young and adolescent boys. He had a lot of them as friends, and even became so close to his teenage nephew, Sanford, that he invited him over to join him at the ranch to learn some work. So 19-year-old Gordon was able to convince his sister Winifred to allow his 13-year-old nephews come work on the family property, which Sanford occupied with his mother, Sarah, occasionally. Sanford's parents, Winifred Clark and her husband, trusted Gordon, as they saw him as an uncle and big brother to their son, believing he was giving their son a chance at a better life. Even more, his grandmother Sarah would also help with looking after her grandson Sanford. However, they had no idea they were sending him straight into hell. On the day Sanford, his 13-year-old nephew, arrived at the ranch, he was expecting farm chores and fresh air. What he met instead was terror. Almost immediately, Gordon began abusing him. He physically abused him, beatings with a belt, using different tools to injure him for almost no reason. Sanford was in disbelief. Gordon instilled a lot of fear almost immediately, giving him no time to process any thoughts. Gordon further proceeded to begin sexually abusing Sanford, repeatedly sleeping with him anytime he wanted to, often at night and during the day in isolated areas of the ranch. He emotionally and psychologically abused him, threatened to unalive him if he tried to escape, or tell anyone, put a lot of fear in him by claiming that he had ended the life of many others before and would easily frame him up if he doesn't cooperate. He also made him do a lot of forced labor, starved him, and put him on chains while he worked, all of this under constant surveillance. While Gordon finally felt he had Sanford in his hands, he further used Sanford as a bait to lure and invite other boys around his age to the ranch. He would force him to pose as a playmate by inviting young boys over, and when they were in the ranch, Gordon would abduct them as his new victims. Once he abducted a 10-year-old Mexican boy, and after torturing and having sex with him, he ordered Sanford to dismember the body and bury it in the desert. The ranch's remote location and assumed chicken activities provided a good disguise for easily holding people captive without suspicion. The shocking part of it all was Gordon's mother. Sarah, who lived on the ranch too, was aware of most of this, and sometimes participated, though it would be later revealed that her role was more enabling than direct. She participated in the murder of 9-year-old Walter from Los Angeles by joining her son to beat him to death with an axe after her son lured him to the ranch and held him for days, repeatedly taking advantage of him sexually. Once again, Gordon forced Sanford to bury the body of Walter, even forcing him to participate in striking him with an axe so he can be complicit of the murder. Some psychologists who later studied the case described Sarah's participation as a folie à deux, which means shared psychosis, where Sarah had surrendered her own moral compass to protect and defend her son at all costs, even when that meant murdering a child with her own hands. From the year 1926 to 1928, up to 17 other boys would disappearing around Los Angeles, including two brothers, the Winslow brothers, aged 10 and 12 years old. Most of these boys would be lured over by placing a newspaper ad for job opportunities. All of this continued easily, because around this time, missing children rarely made headlines. Their cases slipped through the cracks. The parents and the communities cried, searched, and reported to the police. However, the police was unable to do anything about this and was overwhelmed by the growing number of missing kids they couldn't trace or give an answer to. Meanwhile, at the secluded ranch, Gordon grew bolder, more reckless, and more monstrous. He continued luring more and more boys to the farm under the guise of work, money, or opportunity, and once they arrived, they never left. Sanford saw everything. He witnessed Gordon's cruelty, his violence, and the unthinkable acts he carried out in the ranch. He lived there every day, trapped inside that nightmare, not knowing if he would ever get out. His grandmother, Sarah, did nothing to protect him. She saw her son Gordon as her perfect child and the center of her life. Growing up, she had vowed to love and protected him his entire life, and to her, he could do no wrong. Her husband, Cyrus, was critically ill and lived far off the ranch in Los Angeles, so Sanford was left there alone with these two people. However, one day, the story took its first hopeful turn. In the year 1928, Sanford's older sister, Jessie Clark, became suspicious. Her little brother's letters from the ranch seemed odd. The handwriting didn't look like his, and the words felt wrong. Jessie trusted her instincts. She boarded a bus in Canada and traveled over 1,000 miles to see Sanford herself. What she found at the ranch terrified her. Sanford was thin, terrified, and behaving like a boy living under constant threat. His eyes darted nervously. He was malnourished. His voice shook, and when Gordon's car pulled into the driveway, Sanford froze in total fear. Jessie knew immediately something evil was happening on that property. She left the ranch quietly and ran straight to report everything she saw to the American consulate. Finally, the nightmare had a crack in it. In September 1928, 2 Los Angeles officers arrived at the chicken ranch to take Sanford into protective custody. Gordon saw the police car approaching and panicked. He grabbed Sanford and ordered him to stall them, anything to buy time. But it was too late. The officers forced their way past Sanford's trembling attempts at distraction, and Gordon fled the property in a car, disappearing down a dusty road. Inside the ranch, the officers found Sanford terrified, malnourished, and ready to talk. And what he told police shook them to the core. Sanford revealed that Gordon had killed multiple boys on the property. He described the acts. He described what Gordon buried beneath the dirt floor. And, worst of all, he described the screams. The officers radioed for backup immediately. Investigators arrived. When investigators began searching the ranch, they found what Sanford had described: a chicken yard, a small coop, and earth disturbed so many times that forensics struggled to make sense of it. They found bones, scraps of bones, body parts too damaged to identify, bits of human hair. The horror was real. The boys' testimony was true. And the ranch became a full-blown crime scene full of nightmares. 3 victims were identified with certainty. Walter Collins, the 9-year-old boy whose disappearance had already become a national media storm. Lewis and Nelson Winslow, the 2 brothers aged 12 and 10. But investigators suspected there were more. Many more. Gordon was not just a killer. He was a predator who hid behind a chicken farm, targeting society's most vulnerable children while hiding in plain sight. As the bodies and evidence piled up, the hunt for Gordon turned into one of the biggest manhunts of the decade. He fled across state lines, into Canada, trying to escape the tightening grip of law enforcement. But that same month, on the 19th of September 1928, in British Columbia, the law caught up with him. Gordon was cornered. He was unarmed and shaken, trembling, and for the first time, the mask slipped. The charming facade cracked, revealing a frantic, fearful man who knew the truth was finally closing in. He was arrested and extradited to California. Meanwhile, the press descended on the story at the farm, and the story exploded nationwide. Parents were horrified. Communities felt betrayed. And the name Wineville, the location of the ranch, became synonymous with evil. The town would eventually erase the name entirely, renaming it to Mira Loma in 1930, just to escape the stain of Gordon crimes. Amid the chaos, one mother's story stood above all others. Christine Collins, the mother of 9-year-old Walter Collins. She had spent months searching for her missing son long before the ranch was discovered. Her case had been highly publicized that we would make an entirely different story for it. Gordon's trial began in early 1929. The courtroom was packed. Journalists crowded the entire courtroom. Parents of missing boys sat in silent agony, praying for answers. Gordon acted strange, mocking everyone at times, cold and remorseless, and sometimes completely detached from reality. His mother, Sarah, was also arrested, where she later confessed to helping abduct and kill Walter Collins. She would eventually be sentenced to life in prison. But Gordon, the mastermind behind the nightmare, was charged with the murders of the Winslow brothers and an unidentified Mexican boy. During the trial, he refused to take responsibility. He lied. He changed stories. He mocked the process. And he manipulated every moment he could, seemingly enjoying the spectacle. But the physical evidences and witness testimony were overwhelming. Gordon was found guilty. The judge sentenced him to death. Gordon spent his final months on death row in San Quentin. He wrote letters, pleaded with guards, and eventually requested a meeting with Christine Collins, Walter's mother, claiming he would reveal the truth about her son. On October 2nd, 1930, Gordon was led to the gallows. Witnesses described him as trembling, barely able to stand. The bravado was gone. The mask shattered. And at 10:05 a.m., the execution was carried out. The nightmare had ended, but the scars they left behind would last generations.